Now, getting back to where I left off, managing a city. We define these rules in the city to create anti-friction. And with anti-friction, what do you have in the city? Very healthy population. So this is why we have speeding laws and tailgating laws and jaywalking laws and littering laws, and many of them that the police turn a blind eye, and that's why you get the ghetto in LA. They have housing inspectors for HUD, housing and urban development. They have their own security that's supposed to work it. And if they needed more, they could have got more, but they turned a blind eye to the drug dealers. They turned a blind eye to the crimes of people getting robbed on property. They turned a blind eye to people destroying their units. As I watched in Cabrini Green, they would have units that burned out, that they started on fire intentionally. And the only thing that kept the building from burning down, and this is true, it was made of concrete. The floors were concrete, the walls were concrete, the ceilings were concrete. And this also protected them so people couldn't shoot through walls. So that's why you didn't have people worrying about their next door neighbor, a gun going off and it going through into their apartment. Unlike what happened with my friend Ray Kayabata and Jimmy Hook when they lived in an apartment and they had a gun, and this was in Arizona, and they lived towards the foothills, nice property, but one of them accidentally discharged the gun and it went through the wall of their unit, through the wall on the other side, it exited and landed in the far wall of the other unit. And the reason I know this is because they told me, and they went next door right away, making sure that the people were okay. They didn't say, oh shit, let's, no, they went right next door and they saw the bullet lodged in the far wall and stopped there. It didn't go through another unit. And that means what type of rounds they have. As I put out, certain rounds deform to tumble. And that was one of the greatest things about the M16. The round hit you and then it followed the curvature of your skeleton. Basically, it stayed inside the body. And why was this important too? Yes, it tore you up, but it prevented from you hitting somebody else, and there might be military troops that are friendlies on the other side, and sometimes there were, and the bullets wouldn't go through them and hit a friendly. So they didn't want the bullet penetrating and going out the other side, protecting friendlies, where a .45 Magnum will enter one and go out the other side and leave a bigger hole, but it'll keep on going, especially if it doesn't deform. When that's the big thing about not deforming. And when you have something that doesn't deform, it only stops when it loses all its energy. And when something has a big blast, it'll go through one, it'll go through another, and that's the problem with the railgun. Stopping it, losing its kinetic energy. And that's why missiles in that explode at the point. They don't go through it and wipe it out with kinetic energy and keep on going and then wipe out friendly ships on the other side. That's why you have to introduce wings, which they never found out, to create atmospheric drag, so it enters the target only at the rate necessary to liquefy the target, and it doesn't keep on going. That's what they haven't perfected with that system. But getting back to this, is the city, you put these things in place so things can move along smoothly. And when you allow people to do these things, you get rioting in that, back in the projects. So the police that were working, that were assigned to the projects, were getting paid off by the drug dealers and gangs. They were turning a blind eye. These weren't highly ethical, highly motivated people. They hired sloth. What do you think the terrorists got through on the TMA? The airport security. As you saw, number one, with the Lockheed bombing. They weren't highly motivated, highly skilled individuals. And this is why we had all these hijackings. Because the people running the security were sloth. And this is why you had the Russian plane blowing up. And it did have a mercury switch. It was based on altitude, and mercury switches work with pressure. And when the plane got to a certain height, it self-exploded. It was a very sophisticated bomb. And it killed all those Russian citizens. But what did they do? They knew they couldn't go there, so they just got a plane going to Russia from Egypt. Because proximity. So President Putin doesn't understand that. That all these Russian citizens all over the place, which I went to school with them, hung out with them in Chicago, that once you go outside like Americans, you become very vulnerable. They might not get you here, but they wait for you to go there. And when ISIS and everything spread through Libya, Iraq, and Syria, they could easily influence. And how did they influence? If they couldn't motivate you through jihad, they motivated you through what? Decapitating your wife and child, decapitating your family members, decapitating your friends. They used extreme violence, burning them, doing incredible things, as you see in American Sniper, drilling and other things. The North Vietnamese did that with the villagers. So anything you see on our part was nothing compared to what the North Vietnamese did to their own people. And that's why being friendly with Americans wasn't good, because we left them very vulnerable. The only way it works if you give them absolute protection. As you show with me, you allow every schmo, every jerk off with a car or walking down the sidewalk, absolute power to threaten me. How is that? Because before I could knock them out, snap their neck in a heartbeat, and protect myself. But when you take away that ability to instantly kill them if needed, then you make somebody highly vulnerable. Why do you think American Sniper walks around really peacefully? Why do you think my martial arts instructors, they deplore violence? And I talked to him, Master Russo, and that super nicest guy, has the martial arts studio, the construction company, never gets in violence, because he is so confident in his ability to accomplish what he needs to accomplish that he walks in peace and tranquility wherever he goes. He doesn't have anxiety. I didn't have anxiety. I was very confident in my ability, no matter how big that person is, and I proved it to myself by taking him out. 6'6", 6'9", it didn't matter. 300, I wiped them out. So this is why people like Chris Kyle can have extreme peace of mind in combat. Why do you think Navy SEALs, they put them in small groups and they're hugely outnumbered, but why can they stay so calm under fire? or Delta Force, because they are so confident in their training that gave them their ability that they can go into places being outnumbered, like the 300 against the movie, where you're outnumbered and there's hundreds of thousands of them against you, but they have one narrow pass to get through, and they can't go anywhere unless they get through it. But it only takes 300 men to block the path against an army of hundreds of thousands, and that is true. That's how Geronimo killed Custer. He ran him through a valley. And through the valley, they narrowed and bunched, and he had the high ground on both sides, and he slaughtered them. It wasn't when they got out the backside, and they were open, and they did get through the valley, but there wasn't enough of them remaining. So their rifles, and they were repeaters, they couldn't put down enough firing power. So he had overwhelming numbers and through pure attrition. And he knew lots of Indians were going to be killed, but he had so many to give, because once he thinned Custer out through the valley and wiped out the majority of his troops, the rest of them were no problem picking him off with bows and arrows. And that's what they killed them with. Not guns, bows and arrows. So the remaining was easily overwhelmed. And he lured them in, and Custer should have never went through the valley. He wanted to bunch them up and trap them. They couldn't turn right, they couldn't run right, they couldn't run left, and really they couldn't back up, because the horses to turn them around in a tight valley, the amount of troops in a tight valley, it's very hard to turn around a lot of troops, cavalry, in a valley, because there's horses next to you, and you're bunched in, and they have to all turn. It's literally impossible. Custer knew that. They were master horsebacksmen. They understood that. And he had the cooperation from other tribes. And so he had enough men to make it happen. So understanding this, consider Chicago a valley, a hot box, and you put in all these personalities in one place. How do you make it peaceful? By being ruthless with the law. That anyone that steps out of line is immediately whacked. You don't wait. Godspeed. Why do you think heaven is so peaceful? It is speed. God waited before and watched with Satan. He doesn't wait anymore. He is ruthless, unbelievably quick. So things stay very peaceful, per se. So when you start giving inches, they start taking it. And that's the point of Thomas Aquinas and Martin Luther. Cheap grace. Everybody thinking they can be spared. It's zero tolerance time. You fuck up, you're dead. There is no more grace. You either do the right thing, or you should be wiped out immediately by Jennifer Kim, who was the head prosecutor for the city of Chicago, coming down on you like a box of rocks and crushing you. And I don't care if it's jaywalking. Crush them. And what do you teach them? Unlike the ghetto, as I already proved this model, they jaywalk, they spit on the sidewalk, they piss, they shit, they break bottles, and they ignore all the laws. And then they commit murder and rape and deal drugs and all forms of thievery. This is why being quick, and what happens? You catch them when they initiate. This is why Japan doesn't have any serial killers. Almost 100% clearance rate on murder. You'll never make it to a second murder. Unlike in America, low clearance rate. Truly, like 40%. 60% get away. You can have lots of serial killers, like this piece of shit that just tailgated me. You whack them. This is one reason I hate the ACLU. On one hand, I understand civil liberties, but when they break the law, they lose their civil liberties. That's what they forget. That's why Dershowitz became a conservative. He realized that you can't give them an inch. When you're a violator, you're a violator. And you need to serve your time. You need to do your penance. And he learned that letting people off is a no-go fucking situation. Because just like they did with the mob and everything else, Sammy the Bull, all those murders. And you think, oh, he's such a murderer, killing almost 20 people directly. And you think, letting him off 5 years he served with a plea bargain, and then he goes to Arizona and he builds his criminal empire all over again. And you think that getting off of all these murders, that he would be a good person, right? Not at all. And he knew that going in, that he could just flip. And when he flipped, it was his get out of jail card. What do you think they show in all the movies? They keep that file on the other person. So if they go down, they can just flip on that person, create a plea bargain, and they get out of jail. So they're not playing fair. They're playing the law. They already know. Just like kidnappers crossing the state lines. Because if they get busted, they go to federal pen. Here's another piece of shit tailgater. Again, I don't understand why that should even be allowed anymore. Japan's moving against it rapidly. They're implementing in their cars, you know, that self-adjusting cruise control that keeps a distance from the car in front of you, and when the distance gets too much, it speeds up the adaptive. Well, they're going to implement that mandatory on all cars. So you can't ever tailgate. You could slam the pedal to the floor and the car won't go any faster. Their thing is about safety. But the thing that our politicians don't know, they sell out to these other businesses who are satanic. They have to adapt in Darwinianism or die. The body shops and that complaining. Do detailing. Restore paint. There's many things that you can do to make money as a body shop. You don't need any accidents. So they don't worry about those. This is why we have the work training opportunity credit and many adaptive credits, even credits that allow you to relocate your business. All a politician thinks about is enforcing the fucking law. And how can we make it more enforceable so we get a city without friction? A city that can work together in harmony, whether they want to or not. It doesn't matter if you have cooperation. When you take away their ability to retaliate, and you can wipe them out if they even attempt to, That's why we have a lethal military. If they think about retaliating, everybody dies. And if a terrorist organization knew that one of them, that all of them would be done. See, you can't give them an inch. If one of them step out of line, you whack all of them. And you learn this in the mafia stuff and that when they have rivals and they wipe them all out. Watch The Godfather. And he's consolidating his power. He doesn't want anyone to be able to stand against him. And so what he does, he wipes them all out. In number 2. Oh, he hits them all. The only one standing is him. That means there's no one to retaliate. So if one goes, they all go. So they're in it together. And then what do they do? This is what they did in North Korea as well. You're tied in with them, whether you like it or not. They fuck up, you all go. And that's what we can do with deportation. One Saudi Arabian fucks up, they're all deported. Truly, they have to prove they did everything to stop them. And if they didn't, they're all gone. That gives them great motivation to make sure that each other is doing the right thing. So you get rid of the business. You wipe it out. You close up, as they did with Jack in the Box when it had E. coli. Do you see a Jack in the Box in the state of Illinois? There used to be a bunch of them. They closed them all up when they had the E. coli thing. Every Jack in the Box was terminated from the state of Illinois. Gone. Sending a message to them. It's a zero tolerance situation. One of you fuck up, all of you are gone. But it was the right message. We're like, oh, this store can get away with it, or that store, and, you know. And then what happens? They feel that. I can get away with it, and they'll just wipe out one of my stores. No, your cab company, it's gone. Every single driver is terminated. It is removed from the state immediately. We're talking about creating self-policing. That's what the Christian religion is supposed to have done, as Jesus showed self-policing. And so this is the responsibility of your brother. You self-police. And you keep on wanting to break it down by making me crippled. But I had no problem saying the stranger saying, pick that shit up. And if they attacked me, I could drop them. And they'd be like, oh, I'm going to pick it up right now. What do you think they do in the military when you disobey an order? They drop you immediately. They teach you there's no mutiny. Either you do it or you're done. So it's a different way of going about things that's incredibly righteous. This is why we had the blacklist in the club. You violate, you're gone.
All we can.
So, like here on the street, the doorman used to solicit here, if you didn't know, like P.S. Chicago, poets, many others that were here. And they would, as people walked down, but they all were doing it. So that was fine, but again, people might not want to be hassled every time they pass by a place. So what are the rules? Why did people not go to Cancun? Because they didn't want to walk off the resort and go into town and everybody's begging for money. That's why Cancun was so successful and Acapulco went to shit. My sister never left the resort. She couldn't, and other people didn't, because to go into town, you're constantly get hit with beggars. And so they implement a no begging policy. Either you have something to offer, or you can't be here. We had in it a shoe shine girl. We had somebody come in on happy hour times that did palm reading. We had flower girl every so often. And I think that was about it. But the whole point is, and oh yeah, we hired a lot of music. We hired a lot of live. We had a DJ, but we had a waiting room where we employed lots of bands and singers in our waiting room. And we only had live music in the waiting room. So we both had a DJ and then we had live music, but it was only piano in Baja Live. It was dueling pianos like Howling at the Moon. Which that's what Dave and Buster's is missing. So again, you bridge the gap. Somebody didn't want to hear the DJ, so they could go hear the live music. And then the thing with the dueling pianos is people in the audience could get up there. Unlike the bands, the people in the audience couldn't get up there. What makes the pianos that you get this collaborative. Now bands, like at religious, people in the congregation can sing the song with them. And that embraces the congregation to the band. So everybody is singing the song together. The band sing it, and so is the whole audience. And you see bands doing this at concerts. For certain songs, they create a sing-along. It's their way to connect with the audience. Since they can't bring them on stage, they connect with, hey, let's sing this song. And it's one of their popular ones where everybody knows the lyrics. Like they did this on Good Morning America. No. Jimmy Fallon with BTS, Swim. 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 That song sucks. But I guess it's one of their big ones. I don't see what's so catchy about the word swim. Now, the motion, I can see the motion, yes. The motion's catchy, but the lyrics aren't catchy. So, swim, swim. Go into the tone. It doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy, positive image. But the motion, I like the motion. It's kind of cool. But wrong word. And so what other words can you use that have a better rhythm to it? Truly, and that's why poetry works. Iambic pentameter and other forms of poetry. And the reason you learn different forms of poetry, because it tells you how words can mix together. It's all about putting words together so you create a certain rhythm. I took poetry, and a nun taught me poetry, and she was a famous poet. She had published many books, and she taught me at Benedictine, and she taught me freshman rhetoric, and she taught us poetry, and she was an award-winning poet, and she had many books on poetry. But it teaches you this. This is what singers don't learn. And you got to write songs. Well, you need to learn poetry that create the certain rhythms. You don't have to stay to the poetic format, but you learn how to create certain rhythms so you can make things work together. And that's the thing in society. You create the laws to create a certain rhythm, and you need people that come into the society to fit within that rhythm. And when people don't assimilate, and you have this individualism, extreme individualism, you get massive friction. I watched it as the younger generation said, and I did with all my nieces and nephews. I was friends with all their friends and everything. And I did this to them. I said, so you do you and I'll do me, right? What happens when we're together and you're doing you and I'm doing me and you doing you pisses me off? Where is the conflict resolution? Because they said, oh, we didn't think of that. And has that happened? Yep. And so you do you, I'll do me doesn't work, does it? Nope. So you have to have these parameters set on what you can and can't do. Like here, you can't tell me to get out of the way. I'm first in line. This is a one-way street. Over to the right is parking. So you have to wait till it opens up. If not, you're bullying by flashing the brights. On a highway, you have 2, 3, 4 lanes, 6 lanes. People can move. Not on a city street. It doesn't work. And that's a double yellow. Here, let's see if the cop responds to extreme tailgating. Let's see if these pieces of fucking shit will earn their fucking money. I'm not talking to you. So, let's see if I mention something to them about tailgating. Remember, he can't turn a blind eye to crime. You come up to him, and he has to go ahead and do action. So, they are not allowed to ignore. If they ignore, they must investigate. And they say they can't determine because it's hearsay, but they can't push it under the rug. So, you have to have, truly, if you ever look at the right to speak, it has free speech has a very defined limit on it. So these people think, and the cops don't understand the definition of free speech. It's very restrictive. That's where the inciting goes with free speech. You can't use it to directly incite. You can use it to express an opinion, but you cannot find somebody and troll them under the Constitution. You can't intentionally tailgate them. That's stalking. So you can't go into a place and intentionally incite. It's against the Constitution. So you're allowed free speech to express your opinion, but you can't go in front of somebody to express it to cause outrage or what we call rebellion. And once they troll, they go to jail. So you have self-expression with limits. These fucking cops are pieces of shit. Well, shitty training makes shitty cops. What do you think they send the Navy SEALs in, or a Delta Force or others, Green Beret Rangers, when they need, like in Panama? They sent in the Rangers. They needed to do a specific thing that was an airborne mission. They needed to put them down, and they needed not general parrot, highly trained, smaller force, but tactical deployment. So you get garbage, tattoos, earrings, teaching them to disrespect. So when you get ghetto cops, you get ghetto people. Hey bro, what's up, man? How's it going, homie? How's it going, nigga? Look at my tats. Look at my piercings. Why do you think they used to dress? They dress in those formal clothing and look very prim and proper. Even the military, they have a coordination, so they function as a union. And this is why Catholic schools and that have dress codes, and even public schools have dress codes. What you can and cannot wear. At Deerfield High School, we had a dress code. It only gives you freedom within limits. We called indecent exposure. You have freedom within limits of self-expression in public. They don't understand the Constitution. And then immigrants come in and watch this, and they think, I can say this. I can do this. No, you can't. So all the stalking that's been going on, indirectly or directly, they're derelict of duty, and people should be going away for a long fucking time. I don't violate them. They have no right to violate me. If I violate them, it's called self-defense. But no one has self-defense around me because I don't violate anyone. They just violate me. So around me, they have no fucking rights because of the darkness of their heart. You don't give them rights. Why do you think the president travels with the Secret Service? And what do? They don't give anyone rights because of the darkness in their heart. So they don't trust anyone. And they have protocols inside themselves. They have checking. They go on polygraphs and many other things. They don't even trust themselves. They have to go and submit and go through these things, and they have background checks and everything else that they know they're under constantly. So, believe me, there's a lot of self-checking. But the point is that essence of darkness. So they set up a protocol where not a single ounce of darkness can ever drift in. You allow an ounce, and then everybody else, and watch terrorism. Go to Iraq, go to Mosul, the hotbed, where Nick Berg and others got their heads cut off. Then Petraeus, the surge, cleaned out Mosul. Highly peaceful, rebuilding, things are great. Obama pulls the troops out of Mosul. Right when they left, what happened? ISIS. Boom! Mosul became their stronghold in Iraq. They took it all over. They were just waiting to jump out of the rafters. And they did. Once they left, boom! over and controlled Mosul. And now we take in Mosul again. And how many more lives do we have to kill to reclaim something we already claimed? So the doctrine is, once you go in, there is no fucking leaving. And you keep your foot on their throat always. You don't give them a chance to breathe. Because if they do, you give them oxygen and they grow strong. You take away the oxygen, pressing down on the throat, they grow weak. Hypothermia. Hypoxia. And so you learn this. How to deplete. And we didn't. And Obama, he's just a lawyer who knows nothing, never been in the military, didn't study military strategy or anything else. He had no fucking idea what he was doing. Where Reagan did. Informally. And so did George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr. So, you have to understand. So, in here, the nightclubs, you don't let drug dealers in. That makes the mixing. And some of these people, like women, tend to have antidepressant and hormonal treatments and that, because they tend to have more mood disorders, which is already proven. And then they have alcohol, which women aren't supposed to drink that much anyways because of their menstrual cycle. Or men don't have a menstrual cycle where oxygen and hormonal levels rapidly change. But women don't understand that. And I got pissed at the woman from the University of Illinois talking about how it's okay to drink. Well, yes, in moderation here, but what she said during pregnancy. And no, you can't drink during pregnancy. So again, just like Charlie Sheen's mother said on watching 2.5 Men, she said, I should have learned not to drink during pregnancy, when she's talking about her one son. I screwed up. But she's right, and I hated that book. Fetal alcohol syndrome and everything else. But you don't understand. And that's why my sister would have been a nutcase if she consistently drank, just like my mother was. When she drank, my father, he could be quiet and everything. He was a quiet drunk, actually. My mother was all over the place. And so my sister would have been the same way. But why? The reason their marriage worked is she rarely drank. So it minimized the extreme mood fluctuations, where my mother consistently drank and incredibly moody. Women are moody anyways because of the hormonal peaks and valleys, and then you throw alcohol into it, and that disrupts sleep cycles and other things, and they become more moody. But now you're in a bar and you're giving alcohol, and then you have women who have cycles, and that dehydrates them, and dehydration thins the blood and further causes problems with low oxygen, and they have hypoxia. And then you have hormone. And then if you have drug dealers and women get drugs, well, now, like Coasty, my friend, to me, I get along with her and I can navigate. And the reason is I can navigate these things. I understand the mood swings in that like a therapist, and I can navigate them very well, but I don't want to navigate them. But I didn't have the same problem Ross did. Ross had big problems with Coasty. Sometimes Coasty literally tried to kill him. They were friends, but sometimes, and she's a very intense female, and now she's on medication, and she drinks and does illegal. Like, having Coasty come over and smoke marijuana, not a good idea. And I told Ross, you know, you got all these chemicals going on in the body, and then you indulge her in more chemicals, and she becomes more unstable, and the reaction of trying, literally, and she did literally try to kill him. And Ross was very scared of her. But also, he was putting fuel in the fire. So, you have to understand these things. So, this is why with the Indians and giving them alcohol, which we gave them lots of whiskey, and what happened? They were on the reservation and things blew up on the reservation. They blew up on the reservation. They called it firewater. That was all new to them. And the people, they didn't care because it was on the reservation. So, unlike before, it would spill over. So, the government allowed them to sell them alcohol. And that alcohol caused all kinds of instability, fetal alcohol syndrome, and many others. But the thing is, they were walled off from society, and so society didn't see the ramifications, and it had incredible negativity on the reservation, causing all kinds of problems, unbelievably rampant alcoholism. And then the cartels, because of the gateway, found a very accepting community for illegal drugs. High poverty, high alcoholism, high instability, low law enforcement. And I found out through Johnny and that it was ripe for the cartels to move through the reservations, because they had everything they needed as a sovereign nation. They had all this sanctuary, but didn't have anyone to police properly. And they had too many social issues within the reservation that the police were too busy dealing with domestic violence and many other crimes that they couldn't focus on cartel traffic. And that just added to things being worse on the reservations. So again, you're supposed to be a good steward. And I told you at Baja, 33, it would be like 40 million today or so, that we only had to serve 1.5 drinks per client. We didn't need to serve a lot of liquor to make profitability. It cost us 25 cents for a bottle of beer that we sold at $4. We netted $3.75. You buy 2 beers, we're made $7.50 off of you. And then the size of the place gave us economies of scale. So we didn't need people to get drunk. And then we had video games and pool tables and many other things. So we didn't need people to get drunk to make a fortune. You think you need the people to get drunk. 2 drinks per person, and then if they buy an appetizer, or we had t-shirts and other things, we were rolling in money. Because also we had turnover as well. We had the happy hour crowd come in and they left, and we had a later crowd come in, separate people, and again, just a couple drinks, and we were good. So we were packed at happy hour every day of the week. And they would leave, and then we would get a late night crowd. And so it was easy. We did $60,000 on a Friday, and we did $80,000, and this is just pure liquor, $80,000 on a Saturday. I did at Charlie's in '95, $20,000 on a Friday and $30,000 in sales on a Saturday. $50,000 in 2 days. That is in '95. That $80,000 on a Saturday was in '90. I'm getting tailgated again. And again, I don't need to adjust. They're breaking the law. Why should I have to adjust? And that's why you get people going out and beating the shit out of them. Because they're right. I shouldn't have to adjust. You're violating me. If I did this to you in a bar or on the street, we would call it self-defense, wouldn't we? And we would give you the right of way to beat the fucking shit out of them. Well, it's no different with a car. But people don't get out and they can drive away or keep their windows rolled up. But you get a lot more policing when people walk down the street. Because everybody knows you might hit me, I can hit you too. This is why they said in Psychology Today they do it in a car. Because they feel they're protected. And they are. But on the sidewalk, boom! My brother knocked out Scott right at the front door of his own house. He came out and he went to assault him, and Carl dropped him. And they're best friends. And Scott got up and realized he was wrong. So again, you're allowing people, and this is why road rage, you're allowing people things they wouldn't do, just like when we were in a movie theater. And I'm with Susan's a lawyer. And I'm there with Susan and Michael. He's a lawyer. So I'm with Michael and Susan, Jimmy, David, and Sabrina. She's a nurse. And the guy was kicking the back of David's seat. And David, politely, he did. He turned around and he's like, hey, man, can you stop kicking my seat? And I heard him and saw him, and he was very polite. And the guy continued. And he said, hey, man, I told you, can you stop kicking my seat? And the guy continued. And this is why people think they can get away with things. He didn't know that we had all these people together. And then David stood up, and so did the rest of us stand up. And we turned around and said, if you don't stop kicking his seat, we're going to beat the living fuck out of you. And what did he say? Sorry, man, I won't kick your seat anymore. And we said, okay. And David sat right back down in that seat. And that guy didn't do anything. And we were in front of him. But he got the message. You're not in the position of power. But these are what the tailgaters don't get. And what the state of Illinois, Cook County, and the city of Chicago does, it empowers them. They think they can do whatever the fuck they want, whenever the fuck they want, however the fuck they want, and it's okay. And that's what makes a nigger. And NWA, niggers with attitude. And what did they do? Fight the power, and they told black people to riot and burn down and loot. And they don't take any responsibility for their lyrics. But many followed their lyrics, and they did it, and gangs liked that shit. And they fed into it, and they were very powerful. Fight the power, black power. And that's what happened with Black Lives Matter. They weren't Martin Luther King. Do everything right. Don't break the law ever. And he was a religious leader. So, big difference. Jesse Jackson, they went off the reservation with him, and Al Sharpton and all the rest. They weren't Martin Luther King. And then all the rap music, you listen to it, and Queen Latifah was the first one to speak up about it. And she was hugely popular in the rap world, saying, we need to change our lyrics. What we say is wrong. And we're motivating people to do things incorrectly. And she used to have a talk show, and she was on her talk show I used to watch, and said, we need to reform the rap world. The bullshit they're putting out needs to end. They need to clean up their lyrics. They need to start doing the right thing. But she stopped rapping after the talk show net, and then she did movies. She didn't go back to rap. Very discouraged with that world. Why do you think all the rappers ended up dying? What you preached, they suffered from. Because those people thought, oh yeah, gang action and go and do this and that, that's great. Well, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And so they said, that's great. And I'm going to bling it to you. Like Derrick Rose and his VIP party at Excalibur. He did gang signs on stage. Because somebody did gang signs to him in the audience. And they knew he was from a rival gang. See, the whole thing that we're Bulls fans was all good. Until Derrick Rose played their game and gang signed back to them. See, if he would have just ignored the guy signing in the audience, truly, just ignored him, he could have told security to address him, and he was doing something about his gang. But Derrick did the opposite, like down with the crown. You do, it means down with the Latin kings. And you take the crown and they do it with the, here's what they do. See this? The hand gesture? 2 fingers up, the thumb out. This is the Latin kings. So rival gangs invert it. And they say, down with the crown. And that's a turf war. And so what did Derrick do? He replied. They said, screw your gang. And then he replied, screw your gang. And then it blew up. Because no longer was it about Derrick Rose, the Chicago Bull, the VIP player. It was about turf war. And so he stepped down. That's what Jesus talks about, changing or turning the other cheek. But not butchery, as I put out. When they continuously tailgate you, there's no turning the other cheek. Somebody does something and you're like, okay, that's good. And like I warned people the first time, I'm like, you got to pass. But I told them the second time, I'm going to hurt you severely. I don't play games. You crossed the line, I gave you 1 on the house. The next time, I'm going to break you like a twig. You know, Barack Obama, the red line with Assad. And guess what happened with that? They broke the red line. But more importantly, when they broke the red line, and this is true, then you have this whole narrative. Russia came in. And they started supporting them. Because Obama wouldn't do anything about them doing this, and they were hiring mercs, but they didn't have Russia yet. But they went on to continue to use chemical weapons, and he did nothing. And then Russia, they moved in with their troops and everything and could get away with it. And they made a greater presence helping Assad continue on with his chemical weapons. You can sue the Russian government, the Syrian people, but it violates what? UN treaties. And so since Russia violated UN treaties, and they did, they can be sued. And there can be reparations. And if I was running Russia, I'd impeach what? The billionaire who is Putin, and he's a billionaire, and I would seize all his assets. Because if I was the Russian government, I want my money back. And so everybody involved, I would go after them as the Russian government. And so I take Putin and all his cronies and wipe out everything. Getting my money back for the settlement with Syria. So, you know, and that stops it. As they wipe them out, those people don't have power anymore, and it stops the injustice from happening again. So they prevent future injustice. But they don't understand this, and that's where the Ukraine thing went too. Because, as again, he tested the U.S., and he went and flew by the ships with Russian fighters and everything else. Again, see their reaction. And this is before the Ukraine. He dipped his foot in, or toe in, and he tested the resolve. Where Reagan would have shot down the jet in a heartbeat. Would have gave it warning, it didn't respond, and would have terminated it. So, but also, they knew that from Reagan, and so the Russians didn't try. It was like Kennedy when he put out all the ships. You're not going to, but the thing is, they thought they could. Eisenhower gone and that. Democrats tend to be weak on international things, and they do. They've shown a history of it, and the Kremlin knows that they tend to be very weak when it comes to international issues. You know, their thing for leniency. And so they take advantage of it. You know, they see their domestic prop, and they see that they're weak, and they believe in this redemption, and they let these people go in New York, and all these evil people get away with it. And they watch the Democrats be weak on crime. And they know if they're weak on crime, that means their systems are weak. Oh, their systems are very weak. Their people are very soft. And so they can penetrate very easily. And that's been the problem as you watch Jimmy Carter, the Ayatollah, and everything else. You watch Cuba and everything else. This whole thing, I mean, JFK responded, but after the fact. He should have cut it off in transit. The issue blew out of control. Again, it's the whole thing about grace and redemption. As my friend Tina Chin said, they use it against you. You have to be as wise as a serpent. They're going to turn around your goodness and your grace, and they're going to use that against you. That's why looking for people that have truly repented, those are ones that turn away from sin and never go back. That's what it shows you with Judas. He never repented. He never turned away from sin. And then on the back end, what was Judas doing? He threw back the money, he begged for mercy, and everything. But if you're God, why would you ever give him grace? He had all the opportunity to repent when he was with Jesus. And he never turned away from sin, and he never repented. So think about my life. You have my whole life to repent, turn away from sin, ask for grace, do the works, and get redeemed. But if you don't do them during my life, then why would God ever give you grace? It's the same thing, and you just don't understand. You think you're winning, and you're losing. There is no grace on the back end. Either it happens now, or you're done forever. There is no back end salvation waiting for you. There is just a nightmare. So stay with the old and die forever. Constantly thinking you can back out of it, that you can do repentance, and that you will get grace, and that these horrible things will never happen to you. But it's all waiting for you. And it is. It's just waiting for the right time. It's not if, it's just when. And you set that up. You've been warned over and over and over and over again not to. But you think that you have this perennial grace. There's nothing that has perpetual grace. Jesus didn't have perpetual grace. So you think that somehow you get perpetual grace, that you can just keep on sinning. And that's what Thomas Aquinas and Martin Luther and did even harder than Thomas Aquinas in unbelievably condemning the church. What do you think all these mafiosa, the Italian mob and the Latino gangs and all that, and they go in and they cross and God protect me, forgive me for my sins, and then they go out and they do all the evil. And then they go back in and ask for mercy and grace, and then they go back out and they do it again. That's what you've done in my life. You think my first breakdown would have been enough for you, but you had to propel it through a second. And then you keep on propelling it every day in my life. And you go out and give all these other pieces of shit grace. It's interesting. So you'll slaughter me and give the unworthy motherfucker I just saw on the sidewalk compared to me grace. What the fuck have you ever done for this country, for this world? Since you've been a child, I've been doing for the country and I've been doing for the world. What the fuck have they done? But somehow, you're going to butcher me and then allow them to open their fucking mouth and give them grace. In a righteous world, that would be their last breath. That's why Saudi Arabia tends to understand that much better. That there are certain things, there is no redemption, and we're going to chop off your head, and that's the last breath you're going to take. But you keep on thinking everything should be redeemed. Okay, then we have terrorists like the blind sheik. You get grace. We don't execute you. And you say, well, no martyr. Well, really, if you're doing things right, you're not worried about that. Because the trial should show the evidence of injustice. But if you're doing injustice, then you get martyrdom. But if you don't do any injustice, then there's no cry. Everybody sees the truth, and you've done nothing wrong, like the tailgater on me now, and they just keep on doing it. And I don't tailgate anyone, so there's no martyrdom when I beat the living fuck out of them. They deserve it. So you say, and I'm going off of U.S. laws, what we consider tailgating and harassment. There's the other lane right there. There's another car in front of me. Where are you going? You're a fucking piece of fucking shit. And again, they flash the lights like I'm supposed to get out of their way. My partner David used to complain. Pete used to complain on the highway. And they say, hey, I'm doing the speed limit, and you got to get out of the way. And they used to complain to me profusely. I'm doing the speed limit. Like David says, I'm doing 10 miles over the speed limit. And they're flying up on me and flashing and telling me to get out of the way. The Autobahn, there's no speed limit. So you move out of the way. But Pete used to complain to me all the time on the phone. These motherfucking pieces of shit. I'm doing the speed limit plus, and they fly up on me, and then they flash their lights like I'm supposed to get out of the way. Why the fuck should I have to change lanes? They said the other lanes are fine. Go in the second lane. Go in the other lane. Fuck you. And this would be when I'm on the highway. And again, I would be thinking, is my lights on? My lights are on. Okay, I don't know why he did it, but no big deal. I'm driving. I'm not going to stare you down. But when you're violating me by tailgating me through intimidating me, like Hillary Clinton said with Trump, standing too close. But somehow it's all good for the lib, Hillary Clinton, complaining and saying that Trump violated her and I put out everything. And she can complain, and everybody stands up for Hillary. And they condemned in the press, and everybody goes against them. But you can tailgate me continuously, and the press, and the police, and the prosecutors, and the public just let you go. But Hillary Clinton gets one speech, and Trump comes too close, and they never hear the end of it. And I read all the articles, and I posted them of what everybody said. And yeah, he tried to intimidate her. I agree. He's a very tall, bigger man. She's a smaller. And this sets an example for politics around the world. What in a debate is appropriate and not appropriate. And she was right. It was inappropriate. she wasn't wrong. But the whole point is, everybody stands up for her. I put out these videos, and you ignore. And so it's interesting. They get away with it, the pieces of fucking filth, on a continuous basis, and you turn a blind eye. But I go to Palatine High School, and there is a transsexual at Palatine High School. And what happens? He wants to use the women's restroom and the women's locker room. And they said, okay, we'll create a separate bathroom for you. If you don't like the men's, we'll build out, and Palatine School District did say this, we'll build out a totally separate bathroom for you. You can have your own locker and your own bathroom and everything, and we'll build it all out. And he said, no, I want full access to the women's locker room. And then what happened? President Obama sent Eric Holder and the feds, the FBI, the Attorney General, and they flocked for this one person. And they went in there and threatened to prosecute and lock up the administrator, the principal of Palatine High School, and everything else. And it went national. Papers covering it, everything covering Palatine High School for the one transvestite. And they bring down the Fed, they bring down the Attorney General, they bring down all the weight of the federal government. They talk about stripping away all federal funding, everything from Palatine High School. And people said, but it's a man. I don't want him showering in the shower. He has a penis and everything else. And then he's in a change clothes in the girls' locker room. I don't want him. And I agree. So I don't get it. These are young females, and I don't get it. But all the weight, the President of the United States speaks up for him and comes down, and he's from Illinois. And he's working against the state. And he brings the full weight of the federal government, from the FBI to the prosecutor's office to pulling all kinds of government contracts and everything. And they said, but can't we just section off a part of the women's locker room? And again, he said no. Unrestrained access. And he won. But I just show you this once, like Rodney King and his beating with the cops and LA riots. And so they show this injustice from these pieces of shit, and a whole nation stands up for them. But when I cry out, everybody is silent. And you silence me on Facebook, and you silence everything. But when these pieces of motherfucking shit cry out, there is action nationally and internationally. The whole Rodney King went international, and people were chastising the United States and so on. And Malcolm X, he went overseas, and they blocked my post. And he showed that America is doing horrible things to black people. And it was the cry for terrorists. And yes, Malcolm knew that. He went over there to, meet his fellow Muslims and that, and share how black people are horribly treated in the United States. And what happened? the jihadists said, look at America, how unrighteous they are. And black people led the cry for international terrorism. Look at 1950, 1940, 1930. How much international terrorism in the United States? Basically none. Then go to that movement. And black people and the black Christian church failed this country. And they brought the news, and when they did that, that opened up everything for the terrorists around the Middle East. And they used the injustice of black Muslims as an excuse for all their things that they did to us. And they have to own it. It is a freaking fact. But somehow the black church won't own it. Just like they won't own, Black Lives Matter. Why do we need Black Lives Matter? Isn't there all these black Christian churches and everything? Shouldn't they be making sure that, black people like Martin Luther King did, working through the churches to get representation? Why should they need something of a fringe organization like Black Lives Matter? So they let that gain power. Not the black Christian church gain power, but Black Lives Matter, or the Nation of Islam, and the Million Man March in Washington. That's not the black Christian church, which has unbelievable membership. That's the Nation of Islam. That's Black Lives Matter. And the Christian church, the black Christian church, just sits there and says nothing. Truly. Then they let Operation Push speak for them, or Al Sharpton. And again, the black Christian church doesn't anything. I don't see them up there, the Baptist leadership of the Christian church or the Methodist leadership united together up there speaking. I see Operation Push. I see Al Sharpton, a fringe. I see Black Lives Matter. Not the Methodist church, not the Baptist church. I see the Nation of Islam. Wow. And all the time, the black Christian church doesn't say an effing word. And they just sit there in the background, and they're just back there watching all of it go to shit. They didn't rise up with the projects or start work programs or anything else. They didn't start youth movements or anything else. The black Christian church just sat back and let it all happen. They could have resolved the problems in the projects. They could have set out anti-drug messages and everything else, but they just sat there, and I watched as I lived in the ghetto. I lived in Cabrini Green, basically. I did, on Orleans. I lived in the projects. Somebody says, what are you talking? I lived in the projects. And I watched the Christian churches, and I'll go down the street and show you them. And I watched them do nothing. Nothing. Like the Young Men's Christian Organization, I went up to give them careers and help these people, and I put out information and everything to help them get educated, to move them out, all the Pacific Gardens, urban ministries, everything, to solve the problem. And I watch back, and they say nothing. I see a black female, and then I watch as I help with rape and many other things with black females. Truly, numerous times. And the only one who took my number at the Phoenician that wanted to stay in great contact with me was an older black female. And she was great. She worked there, and she was 60 years old. It's just like at Baja, Mom and Pop, the two black seniors, 60, 70 years old, working in our bathrooms. Or the ones that worked for Billy in the restrooms and others. They were my best friends. I had lots of senior blacks as clients, and all of them were good friends with me. And they wanted to put an end to this shit, and I could talk to them about this and have open, honest conversations. And then David joined me, and he met them, and we used to have serious, open, honest conversations. They're grandparents. They have children and grandchildren, and they want things to turn around. They don't want things to carry on as they are in the community. So it was good talking to them. They wanted motivated to make things better. So I don't see there can be Boys and Girl Scouts in that. And yeah, you could work with the YMCA, and Boys and Girl Scouts can be within the YMCA. Truly, they're using their facility and they have to join the YMCA, just like I did for Fitness Formula and Bellies when I went to the TMA, and then I went to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at Fitness Formula. I had to join the gym first, and then I had to join TMA and Gracie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu separate. So they got a gym membership out of it. And the YMCA would get a membership out of it. And then they can use all the other stuff the Y has to offer. So they should form a partnership. And then one thing I hated was when they built New City that used to be a YMCA. Why did they take the YMCA out of here? At least Mayor Daley relocated Pacific Gardens. The YMCA just vanished. They should have just relocated somewhere around here. And it would have been good for the youth to have the YMCA around here. But at least black people had the YMCA, and the girl ran it I was talking to was a black female. And so here's all the churches. This is where the project was. The fire station right next to the projects. 2 fire stations right by the projects. They've always been here. I live right here, but I just passed a Christian church on my left, and here is a Christian church on my right, black. And then there's several other up here, but they weren't reforming, and the pastor wasn't working the projects. This is the Union Christian, and then there's another one right next to it. And these were all black. 3 black Christian churches back to back to back because the projects were here. But the thing is, the pastors weren't actively engaging the community. And I sat here and watched. What were they doing? Where was their outreach? Why was there gang violence? Why weren't they doing anti-drug movements and anti-alcoholism? They could have worked with Narcotics Anonymous, if truly Celebrate Recovery, but that wasn't developed yet. They could have worked with Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and others that would have gave them the programs that they could have incorporated with inside the church. So again, as David, my partner, pointed out, when we go to the South Side, you know, there's more black churches than, well, the word is living, and the reason they say the word is living, because the word is supposed to hit the surface, the rubber hitting the road. You're supposed to apply it in life. I got Jen. She worked at an all-black school on the South Side, and she was tutoring, after-school tutoring. And I was part of I Have a Dream, after-school This is way before I got Jen involved. And then I got her involved in after-school tutoring to an all-black school. And then she told me they wanted a ping pong program. So what did I do? I got them a beautiful ping pong table, free of charge. And I brought it down, and then I talked to Engelbert, an Asian guy, to set up the program. Truly, to set up the program. And I tried to talk my nephew Jimmy and Matt and that to go down there, because they set up one at Wilmot Junior High. And so they can work these programs in schools. And the International Ping Pong Association and Spin and that, they can fund these groups. And then that means they can have all kinds of tournaments at Spin from youth that go there before it gets late, like before 7 p.m. and that. They have tournaments up to 7 p.m. and then the kids have to exit. But they can have all kinds of youth tournaments, and on weekends. They can come in, Saturday afternoon and go all the way to 7 p.m. Saturday night. And at Spin, and I'll show you where Spin is. But Matt and Jim didn't think about that. And building it out in the elementary and high school and that, and using Spin for these tournaments, and it could have brought all these youth in, so they get all this daytime business to offset and make them more profitable, because in the evening they have adult business. But also, they can set up things for parents to play. Because I used to have all these older people that played ping pong. I grew up playing ping pong. But all these older people, 60, 70, 80 years old, playing ping pong. And one of them, Joe, who is a Jewish guy that I met through Engelbert, he lived across the street from Jennifer Kim and knew her since she was a little girl. And me and Jen talked to him for a little bit. And I told her I knew Joe from playing ping pong and that through Engelbert. Engelbert is an Asian guy, and he made money training kids to play ping pong. And I tried to get him to go into the school, but again, that all got sidetracked because of what happened with my breakdown. I got disconnected. And then Jen, I guess, later moved to Mercy for boys and girls and continued. But everything I had going, it would have been way greater, way faster, better for this city in unbelievable ways if I never had my first breakdown. So you go with these other people, they don't do shit. And you choose them over me is a fucking joke. So you give them all the loving and you give me all the pain. That's ridiculous. Because the Bible says the opposite. That if you do good works, you receive goodness in return. And anything but that is Satanistic. So you're condemned. That's why they say the righteous man has nothing to fear. When you do good works, the Bible commands you. And if you break a commandment, you burn in hell. You must do good works back. It demands reciprocity. It is not you get to choose. You have no more fucking choice. Either you reciprocate or you burn. So one good turn deserves another. So you don't have a choice. Why do you think people give at church? God did for you, you do back for God. That's why they collect offering at church. Do you know that? It is to feed his kingdom. And so you pay. Thank you for your works. Thank you for all you've done for us. Here you go. I love you. And yes, you can say that to God. I do. I use the word love with God. People pray to God, but I tell God I love him. Truly. And if you want to go universal, you can just say, I love God. You don't have to use him. So if you want to go gender neutral, that's fine. But there's nothing wrong with saying you love God. In turn, that says, by default, the church. But you don't put the church above God. You love God. Putting the church above God is sacrilegious. The church serves God. The church is not above God. The church is below God, doing his will. That's what you miss with the statement, thy will be done on earth as is in heaven. And who did God empower to do his will? The church. And the church bows down to God. It is his servant, God master. So you get the agency. God gave the church agency. And that's why churches can excommunicate. Because God gave them agency. And so the church forgets who is master. And when you're a servant and you bite the hand that feeds you, what happens in a master-servant relationship? Read the Bible. What happens to those that bite the hand that feed them? Their master. Read the Bible. They're not in a good place. So if you would have bit the hand that fed you with David, or Moses, the tribes of Judah, what happened to them? Truly, the tribes from Exodus that bit the hand. So, when you bite the hand, you're in a very bad place. Because the Bible considers you a very bad person. So, you can't do these things. So I don't get it, what's in your head. How you think this. But again, Abrahamic religion, Saudi Arabia, seems to understand that. If you bite the hand that feeds you, you're no longer worthy of this life. So again, we misunderstand these things here. And there's a very big miscommunication. But I'm going to go up by spin up here. And getting back, they can have all this stuff. And if they just carried zero alcohol products, they can be open to youth all night. Under 18 can come in. Because it's Heineken Zero and zero alcohol products. Then this is a way for college kids on a college campus, because they only serve zero alcohol, can come into spin. And no, they can't drink the zero alcohol products under 21, and I would forbid them. But they can come in, and you don't have to worry about, violating, so on. But still, you would have to card them, and they'd have to be above 21, and they can't share their zero alcohol drinks because it's 0.01 still has alcohol. So, but under 21 people can come in to spin. And is this a spring social club? Remember, I was trying to build all these black ping pong players. Good for the sport. They could have spread it through the Caribbean and Africa. So, again, it would have been good for the sport. I'm not against that competition. So, I tried to grow ping pong within the black community. And I opened it up to Matt and Jim and Jennifer. And me and Jen could have started playing ping pong together. And Jen would have been very good at ping pong because she was very good at tennis. She played tennis I think as in elementary, and then in high school she was on the tennis team. Her and Carol Chen, who is Chinese. Here's a Korean girl and a Chinese girl, and they're two best friends. They get along perfectly, and they grew up right next to each other. So there's harmony between these two Asian races. And Carol was her true best friend when we were together. Carol was always with us. And Carol's father runs all the IT for Ann. He was the head for that insurance company, their IT infrastructure. Just like Marco Chow, he's Chinese, and he used to talk, and he runs all the infrastructure for DePaul University. He runs their IT department. And he met my family as he did something with Walsh Brothers, and we were trying to automate the shop, and I brought in Marco Chow. Second time I tried to bring them to a higher level of, before that, Danny Williams, and me and him tried, and then I tried again with Marco Chow, and he did his assessment, and we sat down with Dan and all them on how to upgrade. Then my third time upgrading Walsh Brothers was with Dean Patel, who worked for Extreme Networks and that, and now works for ADV, maintaining all their technology. And I brought Dean in, I introduced him to my brother, and Dean was supposed to go in and upgrade the technology at Walsh Brothers, integrating the machines with the artificial intelligence, basically. Upgrading it, bringing it more advanced machining. Not getting rid of the operators, but giving the operators more capability. So 3 times, and now a 4th time, I've been knocking at their doors trying to bring them into quantum manufacturing. So I would assume they're going to catch on, and then I brought them all the funding to make it happen. So I don't know how much more I can lay at their feet to cause change. So eventually you should just be put to waste, because it should be a no-brainer to crumble and comply. There's no more excuses. It is do or die. And if you don't do, then you should be removed. So either you're going to comply or you're going to be put to waste. So that's your choice. So just be like Nike. Just do it. And that's what made Phil Knight so successful. Getting and doing it. He didn't have the shoe. He got the shoe. But the thing is, he was a running coach. Oregon's track and field. So he understood. And he went out and found it from a Japanese company that manufactured the shoe for him originally. So Phil should have a good relationship with Japan. So Nike should leverage that historical relationship in the Asian market. They have a good one with Vietnam. They should have a good one with Japan. So you think about your roots, and sometimes it's good to return to your roots. And Nike can do a whole advertising campaign about returning to their roots and how they're going to build out through Japan. Truly, and get involved in sumo wrestling and make special shoes for sumo and get involved in attire for sumo. Truly, and their training gear and other ways, and get involved in sumo wrestling. So again, just do it.